Hi everyone, my name is María. I'm a PhD student at Queen Mary, University of London, and I collaborate with UAL as well. And today I will be talking to you about a practical framework for designing circular trainers. So today I will be talking to you about the trainer's consumption, the environmental impact of this product, the perceptions that consumers have, then what is the industry doing, where is the gap, and finally the framework that I am proposing. So I will be happy to take any questions, comments at the end of the session, so let's get started. So first of all, I would like to ask the audience if you could raise your hand if you have wore a pair of trainers in the last 48 hours. I think most of us. So, okay, trainers, the trainers market revenue is 1.5 times higher than the luxury market. And what does this mean? So imagine how much this watch costs. So how many pair of trainers do we need to sell in order to have that amount of revenue? And this only shows the importance of trainers in our economy and also demonstrate how much we are consuming. So in 2023, 1.2 billion pairs of trainers were sold globally. And it turns out that 2 out of 3 Britons wear them to work. And we can see that this is a product that is present in our wardrobes and we use it almost for every occasion. And so now that we understand the importance of this product, what are the consequences of it? So, one single pair of trainers is responsible for the emissions of 14 kilograms of CO2. If we translate this amount annually, it's the equivalent of 16 million cars emissions. So it's a lot, and just for like the manufacturing and assessing of these items. And finally, 300 million pairs of trainers are disposed in the US each year. Sadly, 95% of disposed trainers end up in landfills. And why is that? It is because trainers are built on high quantities of glue, which makes them almost impossible to disassemble, therefore to recycle. A pair of trainers, on average, has 65 different parts, and its construction requires a high number of materials. So this is the big issue. We cannot recycle trainers, but we are consuming them at a fast pace. So to understand a bit more about the consumer's perceptions and perspectives regarding these items, I ran a survey that reached out to 375 participants from 33 different nationalities. And across 14 questions, I get to understand more or less how they consume, what would they like to see, and what are the preferences for them. So I will share with you some of the results that I find interesting and I think are useful to understand this problem. So first of all, consumers tend to have between 2 and 5 pairs of trainers. It doesn't seem like a lot, but if we think about the amount of people around the globe, it is a lot. So what is the primary purpose for the trainers they are used? It turns out it's casual day-to-day use. So showing that we use trainers not because we exercise, but because we want to have them on our daily basis. And for our daily basis, we will require more pairs. And if I ask them, have you ever think about the environmental impact of the pair of trainers you own? It turns out that 43% of consumers they have, showing that people are getting more aware of the environmental impact of the fashion items they own. And then I asked them if they would be interested in having a scoring system that could assess this impact. 85% of them replied yes. And what do they associate with sustainability? Because it's important to see what consumers are expecting to know when we talk about like, okay, this is a sustainable product or this is not a sustainable product. So most of them associate these terms with environmentally friendly materials and recyclability, followed by manufacturing techniques and working conditions. So after doing this analysis on the consumer's side, I decided to do an analysis on what is the industry doing, what are the approaches being taken. So I did a search on 13 sustainable brands. It's important to highlight that these brands are sustainable. So that's why I'm not analyzing Adidas, Nike, or all of these big names that we know, because I wanted to focus on what are the experts on the field doing regarding this issue. So I picked these 13 ones and I did a triple bottom line analysis, which means I analyzed the economic, social and environmental spheres of them. And results show me that the environmental sphere is the one that has the highest attention, and most of the actions that are being taken from these brands are leading on this side. And when I did a zoom in into the environmental sphere, I decided to classify the actions, and then it turns out that sustainable materials is the action that is leading the solutions in this specific product. So after that, I wanted to know how these brands assess their impact. What are they doing to understand what is going on and whether the actions they are taking are being successful or not. So these brands mainly use the list of the following indicators, and when I analyze what these indicators says, most of them address sustainable manufacturing or sustainable materials, which also demonstrate that there is a gap between assessing the design, the end-of-life recovery, and the distribution. So this allows me to see where are we at this moment, and also find where the gap is. So I already have the consumer's perceptions and behavior, and then I also have what is the industry doing, what is happening. So I thought, what is the missing piece? And it turns out there is no assessment tool for recyclability and recovery. So I wanted to focus my research on this and to build something that could be useful for the industry and for the consumers as well, and also that can provide us with more information about the environmental impact of this product. So I took the bio-inspired textiles as an inspiration to build my framework. And this suggests an approach that's reactive and proactive at the same time, because it thinks about the ways that it's out there and also the ways that we're producing. So it's built on 3 principles: efficiency, use less to do more; longevity, keep the product for longer; and recovery, avoid materials that end up as waste. So after having these 3 principles, I developed a decision tree. And why a decision tree? Because after doing around 20-25 interviews with designers, I found that this is a tool that it's easier for them to use on a day-to-day and to understand that the decisions they're making at the design stage are having an impact on whether a product can or cannot be recycled. So the first one is a decision tree about longevity. This will guide designers on the material selection and also on how the selection of the materials they're choosing can make products be cleaned easier or being used for a longer time, focusing on how consumers will take care of them, how can they clean them, or like if there's some sort of coating that can help this, because we want our trainers to be with us for longer. So the second part of this will guide designers on how they assemble their trainers through which type of mechanisms, and it will give you points depending on the choices that you're making, and you have a total by the end of this one. And then I did the same for efficiency, and the first part is about the purpose. It's the component of your trainer. If you're adding layers, or do they have like a functional purpose? Because sometimes trainers, they do have a lot of layers, but some of them are just decorations or accessories. So it's about questioning whether this specific component or addition is functional or not, and what can you do to optimize the material consumption. And then if it's an accessory or decoration, how can you integrate it into your design? And once again, it will give you points depending on your choices. And finally, it will guide you on the different pieces, like the materials within that component and the different pieces that you need. And finally, I have recovery, which will guide designers on what would be the end of life of that component, whether this could be composted, recycled, biodegradable, or it would end up as waste. And also to think about, because we listen a lot about recyclability, but we don't actually know what will happen after. So this decision tree also thinks about, is it a mechanical recycling, is it chemical, will it need maybe both? And once again, it will have a total. And after designers complete this decision tree, they will have some points. And then I develop a scoring system that will give them more or less of an idea how they are performing, how the components are performing, and have an overall score to understand whether their product is recyclable, recovered, or not. And the next steps for my research will be testing this scoring system and this decisions tree to understand how can products that are already there benefit from them, and also what would be the differences between a product that is made to be circle and a product that is not. So here on one side we have a circle that is a brand that designs for circularity. So what would be the score on that one? And on the other hand, a brand that we all know that is not meant to be circular, and see the difference to highlight the importance of this topic. And these are my references. And thank you. If you wanna, you can scan that QR code, and there's a paper that I published with all the results from the analysis on the Sustainable Trainers brand, and also there are some other articles in which you can read and digest better the information in case I was too technical. And yeah, thank you for your attention.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Are you working? Well, thank you so much. Super interesting. Are you doing something with the British Footwear Association, or do they know about your project?
Yeah, so I was invited to
Coalition,
yeah, that's the Fashion Footwear Coalition, and I was there like meeting some designers and people from the industry as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It was fascinating. In one of the slides that you presented, the environmental and social economic impact, I noticed that the environmental impact has much greater impact than social and the economic impact. And I was wondering, what's your take on that, and why do you think it's happening?
I think sometimes it's easier to go to the environmental sphere, and also sadly you can market that better, because most of the time companies, what I found after the analysis is like they are saying we are using recycled polyester, therefore we are sustainable. So I think it's an easy path, and it's something that they can benefit from it easily.
I have a question about your scoring system. Could you just kind of elaborate a little bit more on how you got the numbers there, and does scale make an impact, or maybe global movements and geological location?
Yeah, so the scoring system is divided once per component, because when you're designing or building a trainer, you have parts that you cannot like say, oh, I'm not going to put this. Like the thongs or the outsole or the insole, they are very needed for the functional purpose of a trainer. So that's why I did it, scoring system per component. So The first one would be efficiency. So you can see here that you have A, B, C, D, with A being the best and D being the worst. So the scoring system is built when you have a choice that has no impact, you have no points. So the more decisions, the more things that you are adding to your design, the more points you will get. So you can see that, for example, A, that it's the best one, is from 0 to 0.24 because you are adding, you're just putting the basics. And the worst one is anything above 2. So that one is just for efficiency. And then we have longevity and recovery. So as I show you, for each principle, I have a decision tree. And why? This is because if we want to focus in longevity, we will think about how are we making the life of our product to be longer. And if we think about recovery, is what are the processes that we will need to make sure that that material is going to go back to the loop. And then efficiency, it's thinking about what the materials I'm using, how can I optimize their use. So that's why I have 3 different ones. So once you do all of the decisions trees, you will have a score for efficiency, 1 for longevity, and 1 for recovery. And then you will add those. If, for example, you have 5 components, then you will sum all of those, and then you will have a scoring per trainer. And finally, you will have the overall score. Yes.
So by recovery, you mean that basically I can recycle it in like a specific place for where garments and shoes can be recycled, or can you?
Okay, so for recovery, we have different paths. So here, you can, for example, compost, and that you like. It sounds a bit awful, but as a brand, you won't recover anything. But for the planet, that's the best option because you won't have anything to, like you are not adding something that is harmful. So for recovery, it means how will the planet will recover. So you either compost it, you can also recycle, it can also biodegrade, or it can go to waste, like to the landfills. So when I'm speaking about this topic, I'm thinking about all the paths that we can have, and not necessarily just recycling. We can also compost it, and then the impact will be less because we are not. But that would be the ideal scenario. And also like biodegradation. Sometimes if you're able to tear apart the components, then you can biodegrade one part and then recycle the other, depending on the material you are using.
Did you look into cases where the materials were actually reused?
Yeah, so my research group works with rubber, and most of our shoes, the soles are rubbery materials. So I've seen the applications that you can, like rubber can have, and not precisely into the fashion industry. You can also recycle them for other things, like on the fields, like the synthetic ones, you can use rubber as a layer for those, like where you play basketball or these kind of things. You can use it. So also suggesting not just for this industry, you can also take it to others. Any other question?
Great. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
I'd love to invite Shannon up. Yes, round of applause. And we can continue the conversation now. Shannon and Maria, do you want to stay? Stay for more questions in general, or we can just really open up the room for thoughts and conversation.
Feel free to sit.
I know that one.
Don't be shy, come on.
Don't be shy. I know one question that we had towards the end of Shannon's presentation was about the ability of materials to decompose. Is that specifically about the cocoa? But I think
Yes. I mean, almost anything that gets marketed, whether it's bioplastic that can decompose, part of the issues for any waste management system is that there aren't large places that decompose, that are built to decompose large quantities, and most of our municipal collection systems aren't separating out decomposable anything. Plus things like plastic or bioplastic, decomposable utensils, you can't tell the difference. So
Yeah, I think that's like a waste management policy issue, so it just goes to show how interdisciplinary this subject is. It's like we also need people in policy to help us out, right? So it's not just me creating a new product, but when it comes to end of life, I actually need the backing of local governments and law, to be able to market this as a truly biodegradable product.
do you find yourself having that conversation with legislators and legislative directors for whether it's municipal governments or city councils or states, federal?
Yeah, not yet, because we're at the prototyping phase, at least not in the US, but on small islands where we source our raw material, yes, because we are helping. There is no waste management program now on the island of Grenada, at least, and so we do speak with the Prime Minister and the local Minister of Agriculture about how we can actually put together a waste management facility so that this works, but not in the US yet.
On that somewhat smaller scale, do they get excited about it?
They get really excited and they're just like, okay, now we need the money to do this. And so then there's funding, so there's also that as a factor.
when you speak about being at the prototyping stage, what does the prototype look like for you, and what are you trying to prove at that prototyping phase?
I think right now it's about differentiation, unfortunately, right? It's bringing a new fiber into market that looks just like the cotton or just like the wool that you wear is not exciting for a fashion brand. So it's that actual, like the phenotypic differentiation. Whereas we're like, we want to bring something to market that is like everything else so it can replace what is more harmful to the environment. So it's just thinking about how to differentiate aesthetically from other fibers. But we're not just creating fabrics, but papers and paper and packaging materials. So listening to market signals as well to say, hey, maybe we take the textile development a little bit slower and we can fill this huge gap in packaging right now. There's also a huge need there. So it's a balancing act and prototyping more than one product at the same.
It's interesting that you find yourself producing, I guess samples or small batch quantities in the materials that are not for fashion.
Yeah.
When fashion is your specific, is more of your focus. Do you see yourself potentially shifting the focus as you make more progress in paper goods or in packaging?
Not shifting, but it's great to have more than one commercialization strategy because investors love to see different revenue streams. So I think just having sort of a dual commercialization strategy.
You said the magic word for me, investors. Can you give us a few examples or discuss a little bit your investment seeking strategies?
Oh, right now we're bootstrapped and we've only ever received non-dilutive funding, grants, fellowships, so haven't given up any equity. But now going into having conversations with the VC, it's really interesting. They really want to be sure that we can 10x this, right? So, but do I need to 10x what I'm doing? So right now we're only looking at grant funding, large grants, and also working with cities and small nations who have funding for projects like these because they see the impacts that it can create for people. That's what we're doing now.
Question kind of with the same vein. I think it's, I really appreciate you sharing that around where you're getting your funding sources. I think it almost feels like in these sustainable fashion conversations, there's two conversations that are being had. One, on the consumption side, we need to make less, reduce demand for new clothing, practice slowness, and then on the next gen materials, it's like, how do we get the H&M, the big person to like be a client so we can scale this material and make money? And I feel like that's where a lot of VC dollars and a lot of things are going. Clearly that's not the case for you, Shannon, but I'm curious to know, like, as a supplier trying to create a better material for like this transition we're trying to see in fashion, what do you believe is like the supplier, like the materials role? Is it what brands you specifically work with? Where do you draw the line and find your unique place in these multiple dialogues?
Well, I think brands like H&M, we need them to invest in this because they're the ones who cause all of they're largely responsible for the environmental harm because of their production capacity. So they need to be investors and like capital allocators. And then when we develop technology like waste transformation technology, we need them to integrate it into their supply chain. And that's what offers scalability and like equity socially as well. So yeah, I don't know, I think they have the money, and so we need it, and they recognize where their systems are flawed. So we have to work together. That's my.
We have a question from somebody online.
There's a lot of questions online.
What questions online?
Well, there's not that. I mean, there are. If there are.
Are you able to take them?
Well, Stephen, are you?
Yes.
Yes, it's working. Awesome. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a question to Maria Jose concerning this concerning your material choice, this scoring of the materials. How far do you observe the designers really have freedom to choose materials? Because materials don't only have different, scores in terms of longevity, of sustainability, but also on properties. And they probably also need different processes for manufacturing. So it means investment in the production chain. So what is the real freedom of the designer to choose in between the variants which you observe, which you look at in your scoring?
So basically, when I was speaking with the designers, they were saying to me that they are most likely to choose from a range of materials, and all of them, they fall into the categorization that I made. And they also highlighted that it depends on the place you're working at, because sometimes if you are working on a very high-end luxury brand, to say so, then you will have to pick leather or materials that are more associated with luxury. But when you are on these big brands that are more like Adidas or Nike, they don't really care about the material as much, and they also don't care a lot about the performance, like the mechanical properties of the materials, because they want to sell more instead of selling better. So even if they pick a material that might not perform as well in terms of durability or how good they are, there's something that they don't look at. And I also decided to add this kind of picking of the materials based on the ones that are available, whether for the luxury and non-luxury market, if that makes some sense. So it is mostly about the type of market you are at, but most of them, they told me they have like wide open range to decide which materials to pick based on the ones that are already there. Like, it's more likely that they will be picking, I don't know, something very innovative, like leather made out of grape or something like that, because that will demand a higher cost. But from polyester, polyurethane, like all the petroleum base, there's a wide variety, and they are able to pick from all of those. I think the only one that they are not most likely to pick are, as I say, the ones that are more innovative or like at the forefront of sustainability.
Thanks. Small remark, you just mentioned the intention is to sell more instead of selling properties. It's a little bit, how to say, contradicting to the sustainability idea.
Yeah.
More definitely will not be more sustainable, even if the item is a bit better in sustainability.
Yeah, I think it's more.
The challenge we have, all of us have.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any more questions from our Zoom audience? Just feel free to go off mute if you'd like, or raise your hand.
Did you raise it again? I think so. Well, does anybody else in here have a question for Erica?
Yeah, please.
Thank you both for your presentations. This is for Shannon. You mentioned having that kind of in-person component and inviting individuals to the farm, and I think it's always so important to kind of educate people by allowing them to be part of this immersive experience and kind of, contribute to the culture and the community there. And so I guess just what were you visualizing? Has there been any steps taken? What do you kind of see happening with that?
Yeah, so my mom is here, and my mom is technically technically this is all her land. So we envision a place where people can come and learn lots about the cacao plant, the history of it, why it was brought there, and then all of the properties that it has. And so there are literal healing properties. It's like a superfood, the antioxidant properties. So having a space where people are on a farm, not many people even know what this cocoa pod looks like. So it's that connection with origins, right? When you buy a chocolate bar, not everyone knows that it comes from this cocoa pod. So it's reconnecting people with origins, which I think is really important in sustainable fashion. Anyway, where was this made? Where does it come from? And then the faces behind the collecting of this waste. So yeah, I think it's just reconnecting with origins and creating experiences out of that.
Yeah, if I could just add something to that, what struck me about that aspect of the work that you're doing is that it sort of positions your product in a luxury space where it's experiential as well as product, right? And I think the same idea of luxury sort of floats through your project as well. And even though you didn't get into it in the details and the data, sneakers and trainers are certainly an item that can be, they don't have to be, but they can be a luxury item. And so I think that's a kind of a fascinating connection between your two presentations. And I wondered if either of you had anything more to add about the luxury component that might relate to your research and your work.
So while I was doing my research, I found out that people is either go one way or the other, like consuming just like fast fashion and having lots of trainers, or people who buy luxury trainers and then they kind of make them a collection of them. So that is also why the market is growing so fast, because if we are seeing trainers as something so luxury, then we're also like aiming to have that, making the brands that produce fast fashion having similar design as it goes with like luxury dresses or like these high couture houses. It's happening with the shoes as well. So I think it also just shows that it's kind of interesting, because now the luxury market is aiming to invest more in sustainable materials, like, oh, we have this collection made out of leather like that comes from grapes, or we're just using leather that is certified and so on. And then on the other hand, they are copying that, like the designs, but not like materials and like all the sustainability behind that. So yeah, I think it's kind of tricky to see, and at the same time, it shows the importance of the luxury market also in shoes.
Yeah, I think for me, luxury is an interesting word because it means different things to different people. It's not just about a high price point, but it's about the experience, it's about provenance, right, and all of that. So I think launching cocoa fiber as a luxury product to start so that we really get things right. We're working with all of the artisans who really have the know-how, and then eventually being able to sustainably scale to a product that is more broadly produced but still not overproduced, I think is important. But luxury to me and to the brand is all about, it's more about provenance than it is about just selling something at a really high price. And I think we're getting to a point where everyone is going to be a luxury consumer in the sense that we're buying less, so we're buying higher quality, and we expect to pay a little more, but also for something that will last much longer.
Thank you.
Great. I think we have time for one last question. If not, a round of applause.